All right, it's time we do a little bit of exploration now with a variety of 3D tools that are able to produce OBJ files. Right, so what we want to do is take a look at Blender and a variety of other tools. In fact, even tools that are not really focused on 3D so much. Maybe something like Anime Studio, also known as Moho, and they do have 3D layers. Photoshop has 3D layers, although I read the other day that it's gradually being phased out. They have other tools, and so we'll explore some of these, and we'll start today with DAZ Studio. And I'm not super familiar with it, so bear with me here. It will be not really a lesson on how to use DAZ Studio, but rather once you have a model in here, how do you get it out? So we'll just take some existing models, maybe an animal, maybe some accessories. Let's take something that might look really interesting also in the context of what we want to do. Maybe some scenes. No, I don't have that many actually here. Wardrobes. Let's start with some boots or shoes. Let's see, do we have something here? Footwear. Okay, let's get some of these cowboy boots or whatever they are, LI or Lee boots. Let's double click that. And here they are. And of course we may need to rotate it to see it in a slightly different angle. Wait, how do I rotate? Oh, I select it and then go here. Oh, maybe you can see it here. That's good enough. All right, so we have, where do I go? Move this up a little bit, or here. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Let's just go and select that, right? So we could go to the scene, and again, I don't know it so well. Let's just see if that works. Let's go and select it. There you go. That probably selects one, maybe both of the shoes. We'll see. Let's get at least one of them, right? Maybe we can do a Control A. Yeah, we can select. No, that didn't seem to work. Let's hope it selects the whole boot, but just highlights a particular part of it. And let's go to export that. There we go. And it seems to remember where I did that before. So that's good. I also will have a folder called maps where the various image maps, textures will go. If you don't have that, don't worry, the program will create it, but you have to export it in such a way that you say you want those image maps to be exported to, otherwise they stay wherever DAZ has them installed. So I'm going to go and say this is boots 2, because I already had some boots. I recommend not using spaces in the file names. Don't use too many strange characters either. You might be okay with exclamation mark or dollar signs, and that sometimes helps if you want the files to appear at the top of a list in a folder. But generally speaking, yeah, avoid spaces, use underscore or dashes or capitalizations. Like for example, you could say boots 2, right? Something like that. Go and save that, and then that's really important. We have some options here. Make sure you save it with the following settings. I haven't really experimented with all of these yet. Whether we need to invert the direction for the x-axis or y or z, I don't know. That may vary by models, or yeah, I don't know. Depends on how it's created, I suppose. Ignore the invisible nodes. Yeah, if you have some nodes in there that are not visible, I don't know why we would export or what to export there. Or maybe that's, I don't know, maybe that's 3D models that are actually partly visible or temporarily hidden. Not really sure. See, I don't know DAZ so much, the studio program. I had some Carrara experience and Hexagon and Amapi, but this one here I'm not really sure. You'll have to experiment with either. For now, I'll say I'm not interested in seeing it, so let's keep it checked. This one here, the bone welds, not sure either. Let's see, we have remove unused vertices. All right, so that's interesting if you have a super large file and you want to make the file a little bit more compact. So you can say, yeah, I don't need to export vertices that are not actually being used by the geometry that I'm looking at. Do I want n-gons to be triangulated? Now, sometimes that's a must-have because for us, we can visualize, we can currently render triangles and quadrilaterals, so polygons with 3 or 4 vertices. If you have n-gons, I'm not sure if that talks about anything bigger than 4, anything bigger than quads, so you will want to experiment maybe without it. But if you see any glitches or anything strange, holes, missing parts, try with this checked so that it will triangulate it on the way out to the OBJ file, and then we have less of a problem dealing with rendering it. Do you want the UV coordinates? Yes, of course. If you have textures that are mapped onto those vertices, you will want the UV coordinates included. We can actually process those. Do you want to collapse UV tiles? And that I'm not exactly sure what that does, but let's say yes. Maybe that's to avoid certain seams showing when you have the left part and the right part on the back of an animal, for example, like on a fish or on a camel. You might see a seam. Maybe that's something that we produce. I don't know yet. We may have seen stuff to further explore. So if you know, maybe you can also read the manual down here. I should do that. I know there is a manual somewhere that will explain what these options are for. I would say definitely keep the normals, the vertex normals, because that will give you the smooth shading. If you don't provide them, we'll get something going there, at least some sort of flat shading. At least I think for triangles we do. Maybe now for quads also. Do we want the faces? Yes, of course, right? Polygons, triangles, etc. Do we want to write polylines? Now that may be default enabled, but we don't actually render those. So if you have lines, polylines, you can skip those if the intent for that OBJ export is to use it in Howler. Right now we don't do anything with it. You might make it a little bit more robust for us to deal with it, to work with it. Write separate objects, yeah, possibly if you want individual parts to be recognized as such, and material properties and other things to also be separated. And let's see, filter objects. So that I'm not exactly sure what that will do, but there is definitely some information you might want to filter sometimes and select only particular parts. Include parentage. I guess if you have a parent object, maybe include the export, that in the export. Write groups. I'll skip a few things here. Write surfaces. Yeah, we typically want to get all this. Maps. So now the maps, this is important. Do you want no texture maps, right? The material may have some colors and transparencies and stuff, but also some texture maps, and maybe you don't want them exported, or you do want them, but original, meaning original location, typically where the program has it installed, and it's going to be an absolute path or something, a full path to that file. Got to be careful though, because sometimes those paths include spaces in the file names or in the folder names, and also sometimes you're going to take that OBJ file somewhere else, and you end up not having the JPEG images or other maps coming along with it. So it may be better to have it collected, right? Rather than leave the original path, have it collected to the folder, a maps folder or a subfolder where the export is going to take it. And there are some other options, and that's the write material library. Of course, the MTL file, we do want it. Otherwise, it's all going to be probably plain, grayish or no colors, no textures and stuff like that. And then finally, also there's quote paths containing spaces. Now that's important. If you have spaces in the paths, like the subdirectories might be user yada yada and then DAZ space 3D, something like that will cause problems with our importer at this time. And so you don't want to keep the spaces, but one way that DAZ will try to, or Studio will try to accommodate that is by putting double quotes around it. That, however, will for some programs cause problems, and I believe for us it might too. I've seen it with 3D, Builder, the Microsoft app, where it's looking for the material, it finds it, it's looking for the JPEGs, it doesn't find it because it's actually looking for a JPEG with a double quote at the end. It messes up the file name that it's looking for. So I would say do not include that, and you should not worry about the paths containing spaces, because we are going to put it all exported into a particular. Oh wait, that's a different thing. Groups, use existing. We want to collect the maps. That's what I'm talking about, right? So by collecting the maps, we will not inherit that full path and spaces in it and so on. But that's about it, and that should normally work. And again, if you find some models where it's a little bit glitchy or something is clearly not exported, there's always a way to find out what it is and where it is. Hide individual settings. Oh, that's just to do that. Show individual settings. Yeah, make sure you spend some time reading this and experimenting with it, and then accepting it. Then it's going to ask you, where do you want to save it? Oh, we already did specify that. And so at this point, we should be able to go to the folder that contains our exports. Now here is the folder. No, this is where I exported it, and it was boots. There it is, boots number 2. All right, so there's one that's the material file. Let's see what that one says. We did say we wanted a variety of maps, if any, saved, and yep, they are going into a subdirectory maps. We don't see double quotes. We said we didn't want to see that in the paths. Now you could also actually take this file into the same folder. It doesn't have to be kept in a subdirectory, and if you do in fact find any problems, you might want to try that. I don't remember. I think that was okay. Let's see, we have a couple of material names, no spaces in there. That's perfect. That's really what we recommend. Don't use spaces in the material names. And so we have a metal part, we have some diffuse parameters, we have diffuse maps, and that all looks fairly good and straightforward. So let's see the model itself. If we single click it, it should load. Sometimes it's having trouble finding some of the dependencies. If you right click and open it in Notepad++, you can probably see, yep, it's looking for that boots2.mtl. The material file or library is well defined. And then we can see Control F to find the appearance of a use command. There's a bunch of them. 12. So basically here we have the end of the vertex normals list, and then we have a first part, and we use material soles trim. Next one, use material soles, and so on. And so for each of those, it's a bunch of polygons, a facet right there, containing a first vertex with its XYZ location at this index, and another one here for the vertex normal, or texture actually first, and I think the normal comes in third place. And there are a total of 4 of these triplets, so it's a quad, it's a quadrilateral polygon. It has 4 vertices. So that should be all fine. We should be able to view that as is. The only thing that I'm not sure I remember if the material file, yeah, this one is good, but the material definitions themselves, if they reference the material here, that I don't remember if it will work, or if it expects it in the same folder where the OBJ file and MTL file is. Right? We have the OBJ file here, we have the material file, but the maps are down here. Back to Howler and see what that looks like when we import it. Alright, so here we are in Howler, and I'm going to make the image a little bit bigger. New, maybe a 1300 by 768. Then go to the filter menu, render geometry, and give it a second or two depending on the speed of your hard drive. And then here we go, materials, OBJ, and under DAZ Studio, double click that, it will see the various files I have here that end in OBJ. And there it is, boots 2, there's the older one. Let's see if I double click that, what happens? Nothing. So now it looks like nothing happened, but it actually did. No, actually it just took some extra time. Alright, so it's not the fastest on my system here, but it actually worked. Now sometimes it will not look like it's showing anything, and that may be simply because it's slightly off the default view. Now you have a reset option here, and luckily here we're not losing it. By default in the upper left we have the viewing control with the left button for rotating the camera. Right button actually will move it around, and you see also it can change the display mode while you're operating this. When you let go, it turns back into shaded mode. So this here, the render mode, is for the dynamic interactive mode. You can see the bounding box also, left button rotates, and let go. Now one thing you notice also, we do backface culling, so that's not very useful right now. We are going to see if we can change that in the future, but right now you will have sometimes some parts missing. One thing you can also see here is you can change the lighting. There's not a whole lot intense light here. Let's increase the color for that, so it's a little bit brighter. And maybe we can add some more color from the other side. We have two light sources. They are orbiting around this entire scene. One thing you could also do is increase a little bit of ambient light, and that will make it a little bit brighter. And let's see if we go to wireframe mode as we rotate, right? And then maybe we have, in fact, we can leave it in shaded mode if it's small enough, or if your system is fast enough, you can use it in shaded mode. And so let's say we do this. Now I'm actually going to keep it in wireframe for operation, but I'm going to keep this as a brush image. So here's make brush, and then I'm going to go into a slightly different angle and add to the brush. So we're now building an animated brush. It's a sequence of images that go into the same brush. Add to brush. Add to brush. Or something you could do instead is actually change the lighting on it, or the colors of the lights, right? Or you could also move it around. That won't make a difference because it's going to look for the bounding box of this rendered image. Not the entire image goes into the brush, just the bounding box container with a little bit of margin. Add this. But so if you change the zoom, right, if you make it a little bit smaller, add to brush, or you make it a little bit bigger, that will also be something you can add to the brush. And you can also change the zoom and move it in. So you go to the move option here, move the camera, and then left button allows you to move in closer all the way to where it's actually clipping it off, cutting it off. Keep it something like this, and see if you want to rotate the shading a little bit. So we have one more that we can add here. And now it's actually rotating quite strangely to the other side here. So I don't know that I always like this. I'm going to go back to moving it back away and rotate it. So let's get some of these booths as seen from the front, something like that, and just get one or two more. See, the idea, what I want to show you is how quickly you can create a funny looking animated brush with just a whole bunch of these. Alright, so we've done this. We have now 11 frames, and okay that. Now this image we might want to store, or we might say that's okay, we don't need it. But we have a brush, we can show the preview here, and it's not full scale, we can make it bigger, and so now you can paint it, and there's a whole bunch of boots here standing around now. That's in your brush. So what else can you do? Maybe you want them to be a little bit lighter, darker, higher contrast. Because it's an animated brush, you can easily do that directly from the brush filter. First of all, you have a stored copy of it here. You can see each of the images in the film strip associated or belonging to that brush. This is the animated brush, right? A whole bunch of images right in there from that single 3D object rendered and entered into the brush sequence. And now what you can do also is say, let's go to the brush menu and animate the brush timeline. There are more options here related to it. You can load in an image sequence, you can export them, you can load or work with AVI to animate a brush. There's a whole bunch of things there. But most interestingly at this point is to use the animated brush timeline, because with the timeline you see all your brush images here, and you can go through them with the various keyframes here. Basically each frame that you have is a keyframe, and then you could say you want to change something along this path, like for example make some color adjustments, a little bit more reddish, a little bit less reddish, and you can change that by keyframe. So initially you start like this on the very first frame, and you go and add a key, and then you go to maybe the one here or this one and increase red and decrease the green, decrease the blue. Now you have a little bit more of a reddish boot, and there you go, add that one. So then we have keyframes, and it's doing that's right, it's doing an interpolation between the keyframes from the first to this one, frame number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then we'll go to the last one and we decrease the red, increase the blue and the green, so we get kind of teal colors, or maybe green boots or blue boots, something like that. Let's go keyframe that, this one here. And so now we have a variety of colors all along. We have, wait, what is that? That should be reddish here. Oh, maybe we didn't actually keyframe. Yeah, we did keyframe that. Okay, so it does have this, and we can now render it, and it's going to show you colors changing. See that the set of colors here, kind of brownish initially, going into reddish, and then more into the blue. And if you want to do other things to that, like change contrast, what you do is you keep this render sequence, so now you have it at the top, and you're going to do, for example, the value adjustment with the contrast. So maybe you want just the whole contrast increased here, but also a little bit brighter and more value, something like that. There you go. That's maybe a little bit too extreme. There. So if you don't have keyframes, all of them will be going the same. And let's go render that. So now we have a sequence of frames in the brush that we can keep. We don't need to do anything. We can close this, and we now have these brushes in a little bit more intense contrast and color changes as well. Alright, so that's just a start to see what you can do. Let's do one more model. There are plenty, right? I mean, in DAZ, you're going to license some models, you're going to build your own, you're going to be having a lot of fun with those. Let's go just one more time. And this time we will go to create a new. Let's see, would you like to save changes? No, we don't want to make any changes to that. Let's go and let's see, animals. Oh, there's a camel with the map. So let's see, this one here is without map. It looks like it's just a brownish color. The other one, let's go new, don't keep it, animal. And there, this one is map. So with the map, yeah, this one has a texture. And so we'll use the exact same idea. Make sure it's selected. I don't know actually if it's really needed, because what we end up selecting is a portion of the whole body, but I think the whole scene will be exported anyway. So let's go export that. And that's really, again, where we might do a little bit more exploration. So I did actually do the camel before. I'm just going to do that again. It's the mapped one also, but I'm going to call it number 2, second attempt, -2 or something like that. And there we go. And so now we will expect to see a whole bunch of parameters again. All the options, there you go. And let's say we do want those normals for the smooth shading, of course. We want the faces. We don't want the polylines. We do want separate objects. That actually, I don't know. Maybe we don't. Let's try without and see what happens this time. Last time I had it with it. Collect the maps, yes, the texture maps. And what else? Write groups. File, I think pretty much everything we want to use here. But I will certainly need to experiment with this a little bit more. Let's just take the default now, and we're good. And we can go back to this. So now we will store this brush. And where do we go? Store the brush and manage it. There you go. This one we can minimize. We have them both down here. This one here too, and stop the preview, and now go back to the render geometry. So here what we want to do is just look for that next one. We were in this folder, we had the camel. There's the second one. All right, so let's go load that one, double click. And there he is. And so let's see, looks pretty nice. Yep, we do have a texture map there, it seems. We have a light source that's a little bit colored, and that's fine if we want that. Like if it's more of a sunset condition, we might give it a bit more of a reddish tint. If we have some blue sky, maybe we have a little bit of blue also for the other light. And there you go. So now let's say you want to have that camel appear in one. Ooh, there's a little problem here with the eye. Oh no, it's just a shading. I thought we were looking through the eye here, but maybe we are. Maybe there's an eye missing, or it's backface culling removing it. The polygons look like there are quads there too, so sometimes that might be better if we triangulate it, but doesn't look like we needed it here. And so this time we will just take it in like this, and maybe keep it as a brush, but we don't need to necessarily make it an animated brush. We can just keep it that way and call it a day. So once you have it as a brush, the nice thing is that you can easily stamp it down in other places. Go to stamp mode here, and you can still paint with that, but you can also load in some other image and then have the brush image appear like this. Maybe we need it a little bit darker. That's hue saturation value, something like this, even darker than that, something like that. And then also add a little bit of reddishness to it because we have so much red in the sky. There you go. Okay, and boom. And if they are twins, then, well, you know, we'll just get 2 of those. Alright, well, thanks for watching. This was a fun little intro to using DAZ Studio with Howler through that OBJ export. And we'll try to cover many others over time. We'll have probably easily a dozen of apps. And let us know, do let us know if there is a particular app that you're using that you would like to see too. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.